Hey ladies, welcome to The Power of the Ask, the podcast where we ditch the waiting and embrace the asking for what we truly deserve.
Welcome to The Power of the Ask. Hey, everyone. Hey. We're so excited to invite you into our first episode of The Power of the Ask podcast, powered by Savvy Ladies. And I heard that there's a queen in the house. Her name is Derby, and my queen and my co-host, Lisa Zeiderman, is going to give you her bio.
Hi, Derby. We are so excited. It's our first podcast, and we're really honored to have you as our guest. And this is Derby Chukwudi. And Derby, can you give us a little background? I know that you are first generation Nigerian-American, and that you were born in Dallas, and that you represent in New Jersey at the 2023 Miss USA pageant at the Grand Sierra Resort in Reno, Nevada. But I also know there's a lot of other parts about Derby that are also just as fascinating. So can you tell us all a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lisa and Precious, for having me on here. Like Precious said, there is a queen in the house. So I am the current Miss New Jersey USA. And it's just been an honor to represent the state this year, to be part of the Miss USA organization. But as Lisa said, I wear a lot of hats. So I also work on Wall Street. And I kind of like found my way in finance because I was always fascinated about how the industry works. My mom was an engineer alongside my dad, but she pivoted into investment management back in Nigeria. At some point, she had a small business, and I used to be her cashier, her salesperson, her customer service person. I first signed a check, I think, when I was 8 or less than 10 years old, while I was supporting my mom with her business. So a lot of my experience and my grounding really comes from home. So shout out to my parents. My mom is actually deceased. It's going to be her 15th-year death anniversary this year, but my dad is still out there. So like they really enhance and focus on how can you build strong relationships? How can you put in the best work that you can put in? And I remember my dad saying, do not ever be afraid of anybody. So I come from this fearless background, and I have also always been on that path of yes and seeking more. Like there has to be more. So one of the things in my various media features that was written about me was like Derby's on a mission to spread her family name across the globe. And I was like, that is such a great title because I really feel that personal mandate to spread the family name. So that's what I think about, like legacy. I think about expanding the family name, letting the world know that, hey, yes, from Nigeria, but the places that your name, the impact can really get to, you never can think about it. So dream big. And I'm so excited for this conversation about like power of the ask, because you don't get dreams if you don't ask. And sometimes those questions start with you asking yourself and being courageous to ask those tough questions.
I'm so happy you said that. And again, there is a queen in the house. Yes. And so one of the things about the Power of the Ask podcast, we're so excited to really get into the nitty-gritty. So we love to talk about strategies and defining the strategies to actually live the life that you truly desire. But how do you, Queen Derby, how do you curate the life that you want to live, as well as being an example to others?
So I think the first thing to realize is your dream life is not a destination, it's a journey, which is what makes it very exciting. It gives hope, and it gives you the permission to just be, and also give yourself the permission to move on when you're done with a stage of your life. And that's something I've had to learn, that it's not just a destination. Life is much more than, oh, I have this place to go, or I would like to retire early, and that's it. So that's kind of like the first grounding moment. But I think a lot of what I think about personally, especially at my age, I remember having a conversation with myself when I was graduating from college in 2019. I said, give yourself the permission to try different things. And I studied economics, and I was telling myself the other day, I said, hey, for every opportunity you did not experience, there was an opportunity experience. So there's always the opportunity cost. And I went down memory lane. I thought about like as a kid or even as kids, our parents pay attention to what their children are good at. Oh, you're really good at building. You should be an engineer. Oh, you're really good at arguing. You're a lawyer. And while that is interesting, that shouldn't define the path that people take. And I did high school in Nigeria, and you had to choose the path. You were either going to the sciences, you're going to the arts, you're going to the social sciences. I went to social sciences because I was partially interested there. But part of it was like you just didn't really know and like the path for learning. And I told myself, hey, but you didn't go to the art class. But what if you're an artist, but you just don't know because you haven't tried? And I literally leaned in and said, give yourself that permission to try new things. So when people hear my story today, they're like, oh, Queen Derby, she works on Wall Street. She does this mentorship. She writes. A lot of that are products of me saying, it's okay to try. And you don't have to win at it. What is winning? Winning is what you define it as. But I don't think everything needs to have like a prize with a Z tag on an experience. So that's how I think about it.
So Derby, in living this multiple dream lifestyle that you're living, and that would include being Miss New Jersey and also a member of JP Morgan Chase Global Investment Strategy Team, how are you purposely living this multiple dream lifestyle? What are you doing to actually be able to do this? So many different things.
So yeah, great question. And everybody literally, that was my top question I got last year. And people still ask me like, how are you able to do both? Because for those who don't know, I still work full time, went into the office and I was preparing for Miss New Jersey. When we saw the bank failures last year. That was a week before Miss New Jersey. I almost fell sick leading up to the week of Miss New Jersey. And then went back right into it while preparing for Miss USA, having my duties. I think the biggest thing I have learned and I try to cultivate is the concept of building capacity. Here's what I say when I say building capacity. I remember the story about coming from Nigeria to college in Berea, Kentucky. And we had to write essays for critical reading classes. And we have 5-page essays, but something in me could not just think about an idea, type the idea, and put it together to make sense all at once. And this was me at 17. I was like, my brain is not working this way. So I would have to write every single thing on a piece of paper, think through it, and then type. That was my process for a whole year. And it seemed so crazy because everybody else was typing. Well, that helped me kind of like massage my brain, stretch myself. And then from the summer after that year, it was like this. So one of my fun facts is I can type 500 words in 15 minutes and it's going to make sense and it's not crap. And I learned like, hey, you can train yourself to build capacity. When you begin, you're going to struggle. There's going to be a learning curve, but you keep doing it. And one of the things my mom always said is you keep repeating stuff. You try it over and over again until you're so good at it. And for me, I found out that when I would do that, I'll become so good at it and also quick and fast and efficient. So that would create more time. And for me, that was the way of like, oh, this is more time to do that other thing I really wanted to do that I would not have been able to do if I couldn't get this done early. So I feel like that was kind of like what helped me to build this multifaceted life. So when the opportunity came from New Jersey, it was a combination of, oh, you have capacity. And if you don't have capacity, guess what? Capacity is not static. It keeps building and expanding. The question is, do you want it to? And then the other thing was like, what is the opportunity in front of you? It's a 1-year opportunity to be Miss New Jersey, to go to Miss USA. You only go once in your entire life. Like, no question. What do you need to do to show up as your best self? Regardless. Sometimes that's long nights. Sometimes that's super early mornings. Sometimes that is you saying, you know what, instead of me going out, I need to spend time working on XYZ because I know it's going to prepare me for Miss USA. So those things that you call like sacrifices, more like prioritization, because, it's time flies. It's almost 12 months at Miss New Jersey. So that's something I kind of like kept in mind. But I think the other thing too is support system. So I got a lot of support from work, from like senior leadership, from my team members. And a lot of it was based on you had built a brand that people knew that Derby always is interested in doing something in addition to her work. Derby will not just only do her role. So it was a good branding that I already had 3 years prior. And then people also knew that, but Derby would always deliver, no matter how hard, no matter how difficult, no matter how uncomfortable, she always would deliver. So I feel like that really gave people the confidence that, you know what, she can do this. She can do Miss New Jersey and still work here and deliver at both. And then finally, I think for me, it was just like, hey, have fun. Because one thing I learned is like the most fun jobs require hard work. I don't know why, but it kind of makes sense because you're going to have fun when you've actually delivered on whatever the work and when you're really excited. Because when you're excited, you go all out. So for me, it was like, hey, have fun. You love walking. I kill it on the runway. When it comes to interview, when I was the interview, I'm like, no brainer, let's have a conversation, regardless of who you are. These are things that I genuinely like. So it was not like seeing it as, oh, this is another chore. It's like, no, you're aligned with your strengths, with your interests, and also with that whole community aspect of being the face of what possibility looks like, inspiring people out there like, hey, you can actually do what you set yourself to do or you set your heart to do. The question is, are you willing to put in the work? Yeah.
It's great.
Can I tell you how much I'm sure Lisa is feeling the same way, how much I enjoy listening to you. It's one thing to read someone's bio and to research them online, but to hear you. I graduated from Rutgers School of Law, Newark, New Jersey.
Yep.
So I am so very proud of you. And I'm sure when people hear, you are a queen. You have this great position. It all sounds like everything was linear. Everything just kind of fell into place. But this is the power of the Ask podcast. So I want to ask you something that may seem like a little off script, but I have to ask. You talked earlier about dreaming big. And in those dreams, and you're achieving them, is there a particular dream you still want to achieve? And the second part of that question is, what question do you have to ask yourself to move closer to it? Knowing obstacles are coming.
Yeah.
Give it to us.
So, I mean, first of all, I hope the answer is yes, because I hope there are always dreams coming out there. But I think one of the biggest dreams I will say right now, and it's funny, it's interesting because I'm in that period of like, what is my next career opportunity? How do I grow from here? And one of the things is like, hey, I want to run a fund, an investment fund. I'm still developing the skills I need. I don't necessarily have all the skills I need. And I think the question I need to ask myself, which is what I've been doing for the past couple of weeks, is like, what is stopping you from going after an opportunity where you can learn? It's not going to be easy because like it's not your traditional path, but it's different. But you know that when you're locked in, you're going to deliver. So I think that is one. It's not the biggest dream, but it's one of the dreams. Because for me, it's more like, hey, first of all, representation is key in the finance world, in the investment space. But then it's also like, how do you get to those seats at the table where you see how things are done, but you also have the power to influence how things are done? Because in my different career exposures and experiences like this, it's good to be at the table. And I feel like there was a time where we talked about like getting the seat at the table. If the seat is not there, you do yours. But you can be at the table and have no power and no influence. And that is not helpful. So it's like, how do you be at the table, see how things are influenced, and be part of that change? So those are kind of like dreams I have. I'm like, and I always keep telling myself, like, keep going. Like, what is stopping you? And the answer is you. Just go ahead. What do you need to put in that work? So, which is why I'm really grateful for the year 2023, because I feel like a lot of the core tools I need to keep elevating, that is my word for 2024, elevate. A lot of the key tools I need to elevate literally were presented to me. Like, how do you stretch yourself? How do you show yourself like, this is how much I can do? And even when you think that's how much you can do, you're just scratching the surface. How do you ask for support? How do you show up in a room and say, you know what, I have something to say? And that's something I've been privileged to experience in my career. A lot of you have required boldness. Like, how do I show up at work? I just made my hair recently, and you go to work, it's like, you're not thinking about like, what are people going to say? And like hair for Black women, for example, is such a big deal, especially in the corporate space. But how do you show up and say, you know what, this is who I am, and it's not going to impede my work. In fact, it's going to add to the quality of experience that we have here. Like, that's kind of like the mindset I've been having. But then I also realized, to your question, I realized that even though I'm so bold, there's still fears. And I remember telling myself last week, just go for it. Forget about this fear. Go for it. It's not going to matter, because on the other side of fear are people and opportunities that are waiting for you. People really want to get you there, but your fear is telling you the opposite. So when it comes to that power of the ask, that's something I'm also like taking away from this conversation too, is like, on the other side of it, on the other side of the ask, are people who are saying, you know what, I'm cheering for you. I want to support you. How can I get you there?
So, Derby, first of all, your hair is unbelievably fabulous. I'm very jealous of it. So it's great. So there's no question about that. You know, when you talk about elevating yourself, I know that you have an incredible educational background, which probably really led you in terms of being able to elevate and being able to stretch, as you said. You had graduated cum laude from Berea College. You had graduated with a business administration degree and degree in economics. You also completed the Harvard Business School online credential of readiness, the core program in 2020. And then you also completed the Tuck Bridge Business School program in 2019. How did you go about navigating yourself in terms of education and yet be financially mindful along the way? And then I guess my other question to you also is, at the same time, you know, you talked about having a seat at the table. How does asking impactful questions when you're at that table influence your ability to elevate and to stretch and to grow in terms of leadership and your career?
Yes, I'll start with the second question. I think one of the things I learned in my current role at work is my voice is so powerful that sometimes I underestimate what my voice is doing. So when I'm in a meeting and I ask a question, in my head it's like, oh, that was just a question. I was like, no, that was a question that nobody in the entire room thought about. And so for me, I've been trying to reframe how I think about the questions that I ask. I always talk about the power of a good question. Like, when I first came to the US, I was, I was like 16 when I came for college. 16, I came along, was going to stop. I had to stop in Illinois before I went to school in Kentucky. And I told myself, for you to navigate A to B, you just need to ask a good question. Hi, I'm trying to go to Terminal C. And there's nobody who's not going to respond to you. And even if you meet a jerk on the way, somebody else is going to help you out. But if you don't ask, you're never going to get that direction. You're going to be lost, frustrated. And that's something I took into my personal career life. And I feel like being in rooms where I'm paying attention, for you to ask a good question, you have to pay attention. Like, what are people saying? What makes sense? What does not make sense? If something doesn't make sense to you, I can guarantee you there are two people in that room that feel the same way. But if you're courageous to say like, oh, you know, I have a clarifying question. What do you mean by X, Y, Z? You get to see like, oh, there are people that had the same question too, but everybody is like hiding under the covers. And for me, in terms of elevation, when I think about the word elevation this year, it was me reflecting and realizing that I take for granted the things I do really well or the unique aspects of myself. And it's like, no, you need to give flowers to those tiny little details that make all the difference. I've been in rooms where one question sparked an idea or one question brought a different perspective. But think about the impact of the absence of that question. What if you never asked that question? That is an idea lost. That is a perspective like denied. But the other thing too I learned in college was you never go into any boardroom, any room without saying anything. You know, sometimes it's very easy to be in the shadows. Oh, I'm just here. It's like, no. Even if you're like, oh, that was a great point, say something. Because first of all, your voice is different. People are going to pay attention to who's in the room. And when I think about women, leadership, careers, elevation, it's very easy for us to say, I'm going to put the work together. Let's put everything together to get us to the finish line. But sometimes you really need to just be there. Like, oh, yes, we'll put this stuff together, but I'm here to tell you what we've done. So sometimes you have to be strategic. How do I position myself to have that seat at the table to say, you know what, we have a quick update. Here's what that update is. Or I have a question. So I happened to be at some high-profile summit 2 years ago, and we had all these experts on crypto talking about everything. And there was this one business owner who basically said, you guys sound great, but I don't understand the thing. And he was so bold, and she was a woman. She was so bold, but everybody remembers her. And this was a room full of billionaires. Because she literally said what was on people's mind, but everybody's going to say,
I don't know what they're talking about.
Exactly. And she's like, break it down to me. And that's the learning opportunity for her. Now, nobody can ever forget her. And you just give somebody else the permission to ask too. Because the power of the ask is not just for us, but it's also for other people.
Well, I'm going to say this, okay? I think that it was not just a learning opportunity for her. It became a learning opportunity for everyone in the room. And that's what's so important, because your point about the fact that maybe it's not just one person who needed the clarification. There's somebody else who likely needed the clarification.
Yeah.
And I also think this idea of listening and being able to have that conversation, I see that in what I do every day. I'm a litigator. You have to be able to listen and actively listen and be able to ask questions. And so it's so important what you're talking about and making sure that your voice is heard at that table and making sure that you are asking questions. That woman was very brave to do that. And as a result, she was remembered. She learned a lot probably that day, and so did everybody else at the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, your voice is valuable. Like, use it. Use it, 100%.
Ladies, are you ready to take control of your future? Do you dream of financial stability, freedom, and a life that truly deserves you?
For over 20 years, Savvy Ladies has empowered women from all walks of life to make smart financial choices, achieve our goals, and build a brighter future.
We built Savvy Ladies as a community of women supporting women. We offer free financial educational programs, a trusted helpline, and guidance and advice from America's top financial professionals.
You can access the financial helpline at SavvyLadies.org or where you get your apps under Savvy Ladies. Savvy Ladies equips you with the knowledge, confidence, and support you need to thrive. Don't wait. Join Savvy Ladies today and start to build your financial confidence and your well-being now.
So on the education piece and being financially mindful, we all know that the cost of education in the US especially is crazy. And I remember getting admission to Berea College. So the fun fact about Berea College is a no tuition policy education. So I didn't pay for college. It was free, private education, work study program, rigorous schedule. It's hard. So a lot of people actually come because they're like, oh, I don't get to pay. And then you come and you're like, oh, I get to pay in terms of like how you show up. It's rigorous. It's tough. And not everybody makes it. And you can get as many degrees as you want. I got 2. I have people who got 3. But I think that was kind of like the first approach. I knew that one of my advisors asked me when I was applying to schools, what is your expected family contribution? And I was like, 0. We're 5 siblings. Who has the money for a college education in the US? And so she gave me the expert guidance. So the good thing about power of the ask. So she was asking me the questions to see like, hey, how can I support you here as an advisor? And she had all the research. She knew the schools. And that's how I got into the college. And ever since I got in there, it kind of like opened my mind, especially when I started getting settled, being part of student organizations on campus, going to conferences, I realized like, wow, there's a lot of opportunity, which is what the US is known for, the land of opportunity. The question is, who are you connected with? Who are you speaking to? How are you leveraging your resources? So I usually tell people the same internet you're using to like gossip and like stalk people, I'm out here like stalking the opportunities. Where are they? I'm willing to, you need me to write an essay of 2,000 words to get a scholarship. Count me in 100%. Like that was the kind of mindset I was in. And I had this thing where I said, I'm never going to pay for school. Again, never ever going to pay for school. So from the financial piece, I am that person who says, what are the resources that are available? So right from college, I will write proposals. Here's why you need to sponsor me to this conference. Here's the benefits. Here's how I'm going to bring it back to the college and connect the dots and give back to the students. That was the mindset for me because I realized like there's a lot of opportunities out there. And even when there are no opportunities, how can you pitch to someone or make someone realize that this is valuable? Here's why you need to invest in me. I always tell people we're always selling something. We're always telling our stories. We're always selling our value. The question is, what are you selling? So that's kind of the mindset I came with. So even the Bridge program, I was able to finance, I think 90% of that program through a different scholarship I had received. How did I find out about the scholarship? LinkedIn. One of my friends had just won the scholarship the year before. And I was like, oh, this is very interesting. I don't know what this is, but I'm going to write it down. And I did my research. I thought this was interesting. You had to answer some essay questions, do a video for $12,000. 100% count me in. So I used those funds for the program. I was able to go to Madrid. I'm always thinking about what are the opportunities that exist out there. But I also realized too, like the more people are putting in you, just keep it at the back of your mind that to whom much is given, much is expected. And there's also that thing called paying it forward, which is something I personally always do. Like I've supported people in different ways as it relates to education because I grew up in a household where my parents believed that education was like the super currency. It still is now. The question is, how do you get an education in a smart way or in a thoughtful way? And even when I do programs too, I still apply for scholarships. Some people laugh at me. They're like, you work on Wall Street. I'm like, yeah, I work on Wall Street, but I'm not the CEO. But the whole point is, if there are resources out there, leverage them. And then when it's time to, give back, giving is always a huge part of that financing in terms of, yes, get your money good. Because I know Savvy Ladies does a lot of things about like financial literacy, money education. But I think the balance to that is also philanthropy. How do you give back? How do you support people? How do you train people? So a lot of people have poured in a lot to me. And I'm always looking like, who can I sponsor? What opportunities are there that I can put my money or my time and resources into?
Queen, I have to say Queen Derby. I just have to. This whole conversation is bringing up so much. There's a great queen, her name is Ty Goodwin, and she says, when a woman steps into her purpose, another woman can step into hers. The story you gave about the woman who stood up and asked the question that I'm sure a lot of people in that room were thinking, they all sound brilliant, they all sound wonderful. I don't even understand what they're talking about. Can you explain, break it down into base elements? That is such a powerful thing. That's what we say, the power of the ask. It probably put a lot of people at ease, like, oh, I'm not the only one. I'm thinking I'm dumb. I'm thinking whatever. What you just said about philanthropy and paying it forward. Lisa is a top-notch, dope attorney. I'm a former attorney. Notice I said former. We are taught that you never ask a question that you don't already know the answer to. But realistically, for maybe non-attorneys, you don't always know the right questions to ask. And that's where fear comes in. You either face everything and rise, or you, I guess, forget everything and run. What is the hardest question you've ever had to ask of yourself or anyone else? Mm-hmm. The hardest question you've ever had to ask, not even knowing the information coming. Mm-hmm. And how did you continue to just ask the question, whether it made you look crazy or not, or you thought you looked? How did you overcome the fear to ask the question? And what did you ask?
So I'm going to say that when we think about like asking questions and the fear that comes, a lot of it is very easy to say like, oh, I'm in a group at work. You don't want to sound crazy and funny. I think those are legit fears. But I think the biggest or the most difficult questions I've had to ask are questions to myself. So for example, when I was going to compete in 2021, I did the interview because you have a phone interview before you're invited to nationals, to states competition. And I loved the interview. Again, I already said I could do that in my sleep. And when I was done, I kept telling myself, you cannot do this. Absolutely not. Like, you're working, we're in the middle of a pandemic, no chance. And I asked myself why. It's like, work. But I had to go deeper. And I feel like those are the most difficult questions, the deeper. Why can't we do this? And then that's where I see like the ugly head of fear, because you're afraid. You're putting yourself out there. People are going to judge you. People are going to comment, like compare you, those different thoughts. And it's like, okay, that's a fair reason to not want to compete. But let's dig in further and see like, why would this be a good opportunity? And I feel like those are the kind of questions that are the hardest, because part of it is you being willing to go deep down. It's very easy. We're in a fast-paced world. There's always something happening and want to get to work, get the work done, meet the client, go home, and let's do it all over again. But I find that those moments when I see it, during the pandemic, it was also evident. It was almost like my thoughts were so loud. And it's like, okay, you're saying all this inspirational stuff, which you mean, but let's dig deep to what you're saying to yourself. Why are you talking harshly to yourself? I feel like those are the hardest questions because, like you said, you're not ready for the answer. Because the answer is always going to lead you to a place of vulnerability. And when you think about like, oh, even at work, it's like, oh, do I want to show that I don't know this thing? But then that whole thought of like, oh, maybe when I ask, somebody else who didn't know it also feels relieved too. But I may just be the face to the question that was asked. But it's like, oh, but it's better to answer the question that other people had and know what you're looking for versus not, and struggle in that silence. So I feel like the biggest questions always personal to yourself. Because one thing I learned too, is very easy to live in autopilot, or it's very easy to get comfortable. It's very easy to live the lives of others. And I'm always asking myself, whose life are you living? Whose dream are you living? Is this your dream? If it's not your
what
dream,
I'm talking about. That's real strategies. It's like going deeper.
And it's not easy. It's not easy because you can go 10 years and realize, oh, I'm living my mother's dream. And it's like, whoa, I put in all this work to live my mother's dream. But it's like, but the beautiful thing about those experiences is it gives you that permission. You can start again. Like, you live this dream, you've figured this out, but sometimes it just feels like I should just keep going on this path because I already put in so much. That is what we call sunk costs in economics. Like, it doesn't pay. Whether you keep moving forward or you stay stagnant, it's done. So you get that choice to move. So I think a lot of the power of the ask is courage. You need courage. You need to be real. You need to be honest. Like, I feel like a lot of, like, our society, we just say things that we want people to hear. It's like, no, you got to be 100% honest. And that's another thing I feel like that has helped me. Because I'm like, hey, did you do great or not? It's a yes or no question. Like, yes, there are situational things that happen. It's like, no. But when you didn't do great and someone's like, oh, you were amazing, they're lying to you. And yes, sometimes we have our inner critic, but it's like, there's the honest part of you that knows how much more you could have done. So I think those are the biggest questions. But every time I confront a tough question and I lean into it, it's not pretty, it's ugly, it's hard. That's when you're like, oh, I'm going to watch that Netflix show instead, or I'm going to go here with our friends. Like, no, keep leaning into it. Like, on the other side is the better version of who you're experiencing right now. But you're not going to get there if you don't lean into it.
Derby, it's not an accident that you are as successful as you are, that you have done all the things that you do, and that you're able to find the ability, the capacity, as you say, to stretch yourself so that you can do the work at JP Morgan Chase and also be Miss USA. Okay. This is not an accident. And I guess my big question, and it's really what our podcast is about in a lot of ways, is how and why do women need to dig deep, as you say, find that courage, be honest with themselves so that they can ask and find that power of the ask to come to the table? How does that, and why so important for women financially? Why is the power of the ask so important and so critical for women financially?
I think it's critical because it opens your eyes to see what is possible. It opens your eyes to see who is out there rooting for you or not. And based on the result or the outcome, you can be strategic and figure out what the next line of action is. Like when we don't ask, I tell people, what is the worst that can happen? Somebody tells you no, okay, it's just another word in the dictionary. Keep it moving. I remember before getting my first internship in 2018, had applied to hundreds of places. It was sad. It was depressing. At some point, I was frustrated. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And after that whole experience, I eventually got an offer, and I forgot about the frustration. But I told people who always tell me oh, I've turned in 100 applications, nothing is coming. I said, what is the goal? If your goal was to get an opportunity and you haven't got it yet, guess what? You're not there yet. So even if you know the rejections are tough, don't forget about where you're going. Don't let that distract you and derail you from where you're going, because that is just part of the journey. And I've learned that no matter what, always ask. Ask a question. Ask for more money. Ask for an opportunity. Ask, can I accompany you to that client meeting? For us, younger, rising career women.
Yep.
Ask to be involved in a volunteer service. So that's something I actually was able to lean into this past year when I got crowned Miss New Jersey. Because now you have this opportunity to influence, to reach out to people. So guess what? I was reaching out hey, I'm Miss New Jersey. And every day I see you have this coming up. Would you like me to be there? And I'm still asking. I'm like, hey, that's really interesting. I would love to be a part of that. Let me know if there's an opportunity. Because the worst they will say is no. But then even in that no, there's a blessing because you're making a connection. And you can come back 2 weeks ago, oh, we talked about an opportunity that didn't work out. But guess what? We're connected. And down the line, somebody remembers you and says, oh, we talked about this. There's an opportunity. Are you available? So I think the power of the ask should not be limited even just to money. The way I think about it, money is very important. We have bills to pay. We have wealth to generate. But I always say, I've recently been saying money is paper. The most valuable currency is relationships. Ask for the mentor. Ask the question. Ask the tough question. Show up. Be there. Always ask. I remember studying at JP Morgan, we had the training, and there was this senior executive then who said, oh, I need someone to role play with me. Who would like to role play? In a room full of 350 people, I was the only one that raised my hands. And I had done a program called Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, SEO. And one of the core things they teach you is you always raise your hand. I don't care what they ask you. You always raise your hand. And then it was I role played with this senior executive, and that was already a door opening down the line. I could always reference hey, we met at training. Do you have a second? And he would always respond to me. He would always entertain and give me that access. So that's kind of what I think about. It's not just limited to money. It's the relationship, because some of those relationships are going to open doors of even greater opportunities that will pay you more. They're going to let you know information that you would never have known if you didn't have the access. But always ask. When you walk into that room and you're at the events and you want to be by yourself, remember, here's an opportunity to ask. And you can literally simply say, what is your name? And start a conversation, because the power of the ask is not just transactional. I don't want to take from you. It's a two-way street. Is I see you, I hear you, and I want to add to whatever perspective that you have. And maybe from that conversation, more money comes out of it. Maybe a fellowship comes out of it. Maybe a promotion comes out of it. But practicing asking. And I know there's different theories out there. Some people are like, oh, always ask. I can't remember who this is. He says he asks for the most impossible things that he knows nobody's ever going to give him. 3 things. Because when you hear no every single day, you get desensitized to no, and you just keep asking. But if you think about it, and I know Steve Harvey had this thing about like 300 things that you want to experience in your life that we don't know how to ask. We're not trained to ask. Either like you're trained to, I'm going to figure it myself, which is like the craziest thing, because how are you going to figure out this life that we're all figuring out together? Like, so somebody is living the life that you're living or has lived the life that you're trying to live. But his thing is like, list out 300 things. And I've tried it twice. I never make it to 300. He's like, yeah, because you don't know how to ask. And his point is like, over the next couple of years, over the next 3 years, at least 10% of those crazy things you have on there. And it's not just like, oh, I want to buy a PS4. It's like, no. I want to be on the TED Talk. I want to go speak at the White House. Those kind of things. He's like, look at it in the next 2 to 3 years, you would have done 10% of those things that you wrote there. And guess what? I remember mine in 2019. And then I was in the pageant world and everything. It was like, oh, going to like Miss Universe, Miss USA. And hey, 4 years later, it gets achieved. So those are the kind of things, that's what I think about. That's why I feel, especially for women. Because when I think women are industrious, I just think about my mom. My mom, engineer, people till today would say she could be in a room of 100 people and every single person, doesn't matter who's in the room, would fail their exam. She was the only one that passed. But she was also a mom of 5. She also had a business, active in the church, doing all these things. And I'm just like, how in the world do we do it? And I feel like if women can realize that we are so powerful, it does not make sense that we don't ask. We work hard. We show up. We figure it out. And especially like women who are also mothers, who also have additional responsibilities. For me, it's crazy. I don't even know how sometimes I think about it. I'm just like, how did my parents do it? How did my mom do it? It's insane. So to think that the one thing we fear is asking does not match up, because we're doing greater things than asking. Asking is the easiest thing. Oh, can somebody show me how to do this? Can somebody help me? It doesn't have to be difficult. Because I feel like sometimes we're used to like very rigorous stuff. And sometimes just all you need to say is like, oh, what would it take for me to become MD? And you can ask that question as an analyst. So you have strategies. Like simple things like that. And what's the worst somebody say? Oh, you're not going to get that information. You're not there yet. Okay, cool. Guess what? There's a million other professionals in the industry, and somebody is going to give me the playbook of what I need to do. So realizing that there's nothing that's impossible. People out there want to help you. You just need to find who your people are. But ask anyway. And you'll be surprised most of the time, the answer may be yes or not yet. And not yet is not a bad thing, because one thing I learned this past year is trust in the timing of your life.
Incredible. You are incredible. And we thank you so much for being with us, with Precious and myself, for our very first podcast for the power of the ask. And you're amazing. And
thank you so much.
And we will be back in touch, and I hope you'll come back again.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We love the work that you do. I'm excited for all the women out there who are going to be inspired by not just the podcast, but Savvy Ladies, and by each and every one of us, because every woman has the light that should spark another light in another woman. And hopefully this conversation is just that little spark that needs to give the woman listening the permission to ask ask and keep asking. Never stop asking. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Queen Derby.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Power of the Ass, ladies.
Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to spread the love with #PowerOfTheAsk.